The Tyrant, the Blackheart. But how has this 41st millennium Marine, with centuries of service to the Imperium, even becoming a chapter master, why has he fallen? How is it that he is now a pirate king? And why is he different from the other Chaos Lords? We will seek now to understand all of the events that has shaped the man, Huron, the Blackheart. Huron is a name uttered with contempt and hatred, especially to those of the inhabitants of the infamous Maelstrom zone at the center of the galaxy. Huron, like all human beings, is a product of his environment, and to understand who he is now, we must understand the Maelstrom zone. Second only to the great warp rift that is the Eye of Terror, the Maelstrom is a vast warp storm that scars both the physical universe and the fabric of the immaterium. The Maelstrom is a region of lawless wild space, containing an estimated 20 plus orc empires, numerous Hrud infestations, countless human pirate strongholds. Raiding and piracy would be unsettling for anyone, but the true terror of the region is the warp itself. No matter where in the universe, warp rifts are incredibly dangerous, and the Maelstrom zone is no different. Wherever the warp interferes with the galaxy, there is the possibility of incursions by incomprehensible horrors such as warp-born creatures and demonic forces. Entities with the single purpose of reaping destruction and corrupting the material plane. Although dangerous and unpredictable, there are pockets of semi-stable material space. Fortunately, it remains considerably more stable than most other warp storms on records, and evidence indicates that it has been in existence since even before the evolution of mankind itself. Despite the harsh existence one would have to endure on the thousands of worlds within this region, it is teeming with activity and interest. In M31, the Emperor of Mankind's Great Crusade stormed across the galaxy to reunite mankind under the rule of the newborn Imperium of Man. During the Great Crusade, the armies of the Emperor attempted to conquer the Maelstrom and cleanse it of the Xenos. The wealth of the Maelstrom has drawn mankind to the zone time and time again, despite its capacity for misery and death. There is even evidence of humanity's presence in the region as far back as the Dark Age of technology, the zenith of human wisdom and power. Unfortunately, even before M31, the Maelstrom zone had also drawn humanity's enemies in their countless numbers. Conflict was inevitable. Hundreds of warships and thousands of troops were lost in the early campaigns during the Great Crusade era. suffering many ambushes from Xenos, or lost forever in the unstable warp. I imagine due to exacerbation and necessity, the Emperor declared the region was too volatile. Wiping the slate clean for colonization was chosen. Hard places breed hardened people, and this would be evident for those who would come to settle in the region known as the Badab sector. The region was one of the three most important bastions of imperial influence, which also included Signax and Sagan, each an isolated imperial civilization in the storm. One world of particular importance would be the epicenter of many events that would affect the character of Luft Huron. The temperate world of Badab Primaris. Colonized in the late 38th millennium, the world soon became a thriving hub of industrialization and trade within the region, bringing in much wealth to the Imperium. This hub of wealth had brought in humans of all backgrounds, from workers and merchants to powerful imperial families and their private militaries. Life on Badab Primaris for the imperial citizens would have been a much safer experience compared to much of the surrounding region, although as good as one can expect from a fanatical religious authoritarian regime. In conjunction with the precariousness of the warp, it clearly shows that the inhabitants of this world and region were of an ambitious and independent nature. With extremely difficult accessibility, they would often have to rely on private militaries and mercenaries. Humans are keenly shaped by their environment, and this is true for the citizens, the noble families, and I believe even its defenders, the Space Marines. This sense of self-reliance is a great quality for anyone living in the 40k universe to have. But, as we will see, this mindset would be the kindling of conflict. The Space Marines are humanity's greatest defense against the heretic and the Xenos. For more than 5,000 years, the Astral Claws Space Marine chapter stood as one of the Imperium's stalwart defenders. Their deeds were legendary, and their honor unquestioned. Originally a crusading chapter, they were dispatched from warzone to warzone in order to battle mankind's enemies. Human males at young ages were plucked from numerous worlds throughout the Imperium and melded with gene seed of a Primarch, the sons of the Emperor of mankind. Such was their impressive record, the Astral Claws had up to 3 successor chapters, which had been drawn from their ranks. Given their relative youth as a chapter in comparison to the others, this speaks to the high regard in which they were held. One of their most acclaimed victories occurred during the defense of Cadia from the 5th Black Crusade, for which their chapter's standard was taken for display in the the halls of the Eternity Gate in the Imperial Palace on Holy Terra. A Space Marine chapter that exudes exemplary service to the Imperium. It must have been a culture of immense pride. All of these desirable traits, I believe, are conducive of the culture of the Astral Claws progenitor legion and source of their gene seed, the Ultramarines and Primarch Rabute Guilliman. Perhaps the most famous Space Marine chapter across the Imperium, the Ultramarines are the gold standard example of a loyal Space Marine chapter. With their Primarch, the author of the Codex Astartes, the rules and structural blueprint for all Space Marine chapters after the Horus Heresy. The Ultramarines and many of their successor chapters are moulded by their strong adherence to this doctrine. Though truly unconfirmed, it was a strict adherence to the Codex that has led the link between the Astral Claws and the Ultramarines. Early in the history of the Astral Claws, the ties to their founding legion would have been stronger. Particularly that often new founding chapters are started from the veterans of the former. To understand the mindset of the early Astral Claws, we have to take a look at the environment that moulded them. Macragge. On the homeworld of the Ultramarines, they transcend the responsibilities that they are expected of a normal Space Marine chapter. The Ultramarines directly rule the subsector of space in the eastern fringe known as Ultramar. Ruled as a fief of the Imperium, and their chapter master is also considered the Lord of Macragge and the Master of Ultramar. Though a fleet-based chapter from their foundations to M41, integration with the command structure of the Imperium runs in their veins. The greatest example of all this influence will come to prominence in a new recruit for the Legion, Luft Huron. First displaying his valour during the campaign to conquer the outcast Aldari Exodite world of Lailu. He fought through in a psychic assault and killed an Asurai warlock with his bare hands, saving his squad. He soon proved that he was a natural leader and insightful tactician in a number of battles. His rise was meteoric from this point on, as he ascended to the first chapter's 3rd Battle Company, and then joined the veterans of the Astral Claws' elite 1st Company, where his raw combat skills saw him raised to command other Space Marine veterans with far more practical experience than he had. Not through words, but through action, Luft Huron was beginning to prove that he was a progeny amongst his chapter. A warrior combined with a gene seed descended from the God Emperor of mankind, a talented tactician and combatant. He must have exemplified what the Astral Claws saw as the best of humanity. But within the ranks of the Astral Claws, there were those who saw Huron's rapid ascension and fanatical devotion of those that served him as a threat. For they feared that the growing loyalty to Huron was greater than their fellow battle brothers' love for their chapter. When the chapter was assigned to the Maelstrom zone in mid-M41, disaster had struck when the current chapter master was slain. The mantle of leadership for the chapter was empty, and amongst all the candidates, only one gathered enormous support. Even with the older and more experienced veterans, only one name united the chapter. In 715 M41, Huron became the youngest ever Astral Claws chapter master. In 718 M41, a failed coup attempt on the hive world of Badab Primaris led to a civil war, and the Astral Claws stepped in and brutally crushed the conflict. The Astral Claws had assumed their role of Maelstrom wardens for many years at this point. Seeing common humans bicker amongst themselves whilst deep inside a dangerous territory of space must have been frustrating. Huron employed the Astral Claws much more brutally as they executed much of the planet's ruling class, as well as purging those they perceived as morally irreprehensible. Taking upon himself the mantle of planetary ruler, Huron stylized himself the Tyrant of Badab. The Maelstrom Zone is a cruel and dangerous place, and to secure it, Huron had seen the need for an iron fist. The nearby systems too were purged of their ruling elites, and in the decades afterwards, a number of Astral Claws watch bastions were established. The tyrant's chosen servants and political allies were placed in the positions of power, turning the Badab sector into a pocket empire commanded by the Astral Claws. To further cement his power, a reorganization of the Planetary Defences Force was undertaken and transformed into the Tyrant's Legion. Forces comprised of the weaker humans to act as a vanguard force for the chapter. Having a chapter master as planetary governor was not unheard of, especially considering the Astral Claws' heritage. With a homeworld and an army, the stance of stagnant defense could be changed to on the attack. The chapter was able to conduct a series of lightning raids into the outlying areas of the Maelstrom, destroying heretic and Xenos-controlled strongholds. Huron's tally of victories rolled in, each one confounding the idea that he was winning, and so he was right. After all, securing the Maelstrom Zone was his purpose. Victory was on the cards, and Huron petitioned the High Lords of Terror for assistance, suggesting even that a new founding might even be warranted. Unfortunately, Huron's petition was dismissed without a full hearing. Something that would not surprise anyone, especially the Space Marines, is the corrupt bureaucracy of the Imperium. Untouchable elites, only concerned with the Imperial tithes, and a complete lack of initiative. I believe this may have been a major contributing factor to Huron's takeover, and it was becoming a constant interference with his idea of a secure Maelstrom zone. It was his purpose to secure the Maelstrom zone. His action in recent years had shown him that sticking to the rules would prevent his success. The Maelstrom zone itself is a gigantic area of space, and with the chapter's 1,000 Marines, this could spread them dangerously thin. Abandoning the tenets of the Codex Astartes, Huron swelled the ranks of the chapter of the Astral Claws with their successor chapter, the Tiger Claws, as well as creating shortcuts to the creation of new Space Marines. The Astral Claws were at their strongest. Approximately 3,000 Marines, plus auxiliaries, were at Huron's command. Though not a heretic or a traitor to the Emperor, it's clear that Huron had evolved and was now guided by the principle that the ends justified the means. Though becoming more independently minded over the years as the tyrant, Huron was still a servant of the Imperium, and made one last grand effort to direct the Imperium to conquer the Maelstrom. Finally, in M41, the Black Templars chapter declared a crusade of wrath into the Maelstrom, assaulting it from its eastward marches. Meanwhile, the Astral Claws, Lamenters, and Mantis Warriors launched their own assaults. At the culmination of the battle against the Flesh Haunters, the Astral Claws' first company, led by Huron personally, fought their way deep within the foul creature's carcass vaults, before unleashing the Life-Eater virus upon the abominations in a rain of virus bombs. But once again, Imperial bureaucracy had put a premature end to the Astral Claws' plans, as the Black Templars were suddenly called away. Having sustained substantial losses, the chapters were forced to withdraw. Unable to complete their objectives. Once again, the Imperium failed the Astral Claws. It failed Huron. During the mid-M41, the Astral Claws' submission of required gene seed ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus became infrequent. Although initially concerning, this was not uncommon, particularly for those Space Marine chapters in hostile territories. But the delay had continued for decades. This may have tipped off the Mechanicus that there was more going on. Taking the responsibility solely into his own hands, Huron must have felt it was a waste not to use this gene seed for new Marines. The situation was coming to a head. The Imperium is a corrupt and stagnant mess. Resources and military power was continually misused by the Imperial bureaucrats. The Astral Claws and the other Maelstrom Warden chapters would never win. if they continue to answer to the uncaring High Lords of Terror. To answer the continuing threats to the control of his domain, Luft Huron issued the infamous Articles of Just Succession, which were also signed and ratified by the Masters of the Lamenters and Mantis Warrior chapters. These documents were designed to formally sever the Maelstrom Zone's ties to the Imperium, and putting their fate in their own hands. Huron's purpose, him and his chapter's reasoning for being, was to secure this zone, to defend it from the Xenos, the heretic, and it seems anyone who would threaten it. After all the rule breaking and transgressions that when ignored, it was the halting of imperial tithes that caught the attention of the High Lords. The Imperium doesn't care about the quality of your life, or whether you live at all, but no matter what excuse, you must submit your tithes. It seems that war was inevitable, both sides unwilling to compromise. On one side, the Astral Claws, the Executioners, the Lamenters, and Mantis Warriors chapters. A mix of old oaths, fellow Maelstrom Wardens, also the forces of the Tyrant Legion, an army that had now been led by Huron for centuries, a generation born under the rule of the Astral Claws. Opposing them, the Red Scorpions chapter, which formed the greatest part of the loyal Space Marine force, backed by battle companies drawn from the Salamanders, Raptors, Fire Angels, and surviving members of the Firehawks and Marines Errant chapters. The Badab War had begun. Space Marines would clash against each other in fierce and brutal orbital and ground conflicts. As the years would pass, the conflict would become more vicious and personal, as the tally of the dead on both sides increased. For nearly a decade, the tide of the war would ebb and flow. The tactics of Huron's forces rose in depravity, as they would commit numerous war crimes and would stop taking prisoners alive. This war was spiraling out of control for both sides, but I believe Huron would rather have died than lose. The takeover, becoming the tyrant, succeeding from the Imperium were all his schemes. I don't believe he even thought he was ever in the wrong, as he had the responsibility to achieve his goal by any means. The event that just shows how far he was willing to go was known as the Betrayal at Grief. A parley was arranged to take place on an abandoned way station in the orbit around the gas giant Shedian, in the outer reaches of the uninhabited Grief system. Perhaps a chance for peace, for the leadership on both sides to come together. No complete account survives of what truly happened, but what became clear that the talks had begun to break down, each side railing against the other in breach of their war crimes. The resentment, the hatred, from the usually compromised and composed Space Marines bubbled to the surface, and a bloody melee broke out. In the chaos, The chapter masters of the Mantis Warriors and Red Scorpions were slain, with only Huron barely escaping. A tragedy for all involved. Perhaps a tragedy not by accident, but one architected. There had been rumours amongst the successionists of growing disquiet among the Mantis Warriors for their support in the cause. With the murder of their chapter master, they would cry out for revenge. Exactly what would benefit Huron? This is who Loved Huron was becoming, willing to betray his own allies in the name of the cause. I believe the title of Warlord rather than Chapter Master would suit him better now. Disregarding his honor, not keeping his word, the war crimes, the oppressive leadership, and the arrogance. As each day passes, he was becoming more and more a monster. The Badab War had burnt for almost a solar decade. arrogance. I believe the Chaos Gods offered everything he ever wanted. A chance to conquer, a chance for revenge, a chance to be on the lips of all the Imperium. Luft Huron was a 41st Millennium Marine. He knew what these gods were, but was too strong to deny. But whose offer to accept? Which Chaos God would he serve? I believe that such was his stubbornness and arrogance, even at death's door, he offered not submission, but a compromise. Destruction of the Imperium. Barely a company's strength had survived the fall of the Palace of Thorns. Amongst them stood veterans and new Astartes alike. And on the 8th day, a walking body of scar tissue and machinery rose, its chewed face twitching from agony, perhaps an appearance that reflected the soul within. Without a word, the Astral Claws knelt to Huron then and there. He ordered his remaining warriors to be silent. He told them that they were created to tame the Maelstrom zone, that they deserved to rule over its weak inhabitants. He told them to rise, to strike out the symbols of loyalty to the Imperium which had betrayed them, and to paint their armor red for the blood of their murdered brothers. They would survive. He said that they would take what is theirs. In that moment, the survivors of Badab shared their last tattered scraps of honor. The Astral Claws were no more. Only their bloody shadow remained, clad in crimson. They were now the Red Corsairs. Reborn, Luft Huron and his remaining 200 Marines had forsaken the Emperor and the Imperium for new benefactors, the Chaos Gods. Huron was the tyrant of Badab, a descendant of Ultramar. His ego could only be sated with one thing: conquest of the Maelstrom zone. Starting with potential rivals, Huron's limited forces easily overwhelmed the first pirate strongholds they found, slaughtering all the Corsairs within. The survivors swore allegiance to the tyrant and became his slaves, soon learning to fear his displeasure. On renegade worlds, Huron slew petty kings and forced mutant lords to kneel at his feet. When the other pirate lords of the Maelstrom refused his demands, he slew their followers, looted their holdings, and gave them to the warp-twisted mutants that infested his ships for sport. Soon, the outcasts of the Maelstrom learned not to refuse the master of the Red Corsairs. From the pirates and renegade navigator clans he took ships, from the populations he took flesh and muscle to labour in his holds. Piece by piece, Huron and the Red Corsairs had built a dark mirror to their lost realm of Badab, a twisted display of the Empire building nature in his blood. From his throne on the rusted space station of Hell's Iris, Huron watched as his power grew, unbounded by the hypocrisy of the Imperium. In all regards, he was an unrestricted version of the tyrant he always was. The inhabitant of the Maelstrom named Huron the Blackheart. A man with a rotten core that would only darken as he would delve deeper into the powers offered by chaos. Often regarded as a marine of impressive martial and tactical prowess, he had only become more deadly since his fall, increasing his strength with the Hamadria, a peculiar creature which had been bound to Huron. With blank red eyes, it resembled something like a featherless bird or a skinless dog. But when seen on the edge of sight, its shape changed, bloating in size, or turning and flickering in a pillar of flame. When in the presence of this mysterious warp creature, it seems to grant Huron psychic abilities, raising his prowess onto another level. The Red Corsairs under Huron's fist had grown significantly, with their recruitment of other renegade and traitor marines swelling their ranks. But, as is the nature of chaos, one's position is never fully secure. Huron Blackheart is a post-heresy marine, with chaos filled with the ranks of demons and pre-heresy marines. Difficulty comes with not being crushed or absorbed by the older traitor legions or single god aligned warbands. However, it may have worked in his favour, as his temperament fits the designs of another, Abaddon, a warrior who uses the warp as a tool and is no complete slave to the Chaos Gods. Huron Blackheart is an ally Abaddon could use. To secure his cooperation, a Blackstone fortress was secretly given as a gift from the Despoiler to Huron, a great boon to his power, one he would use during the events of the Terran Crusade, when the Red Corsairs ambushed Guilliman's fleet and took both it and the Primarch captive aboard. Perhaps a cruel twist of irony, as a son of Guilliman was responsible for his own capture, only managing to escape due to Scarbrand and the Cornate demons attacking the fortress that was seeking Guilliman's head, and clashed with the Red Corsairs. Currently, with the opening of the Great Rift, the power and the arrogance of the Red Corsairs has made them so bold as to siege Chagoris, home of the White Scars. The entire Yasan region falls to the predation of Huron Blackheart. With renegades and demons, it seems that the sons of Jagatai Khan will be facing the wrath of this corrupted tyrant. From the days of being a chapter master of a renowned loyal Space Marine chapter, to a Chaos Lord besieging the homeworld of the White Scars. In the words of Rabute Guilliman, cruel men make cruel warriors, make cruel lords. This is Huron. He was strong and a capable marine shaped by a hostile environment, who had tried to shape his surroundings into his version of a better place. I believe that this is the path of what makes him truly evil, shaping the universe to the ideals of one man and destroying those who disagree. It wasn't necessarily the act of the crimes he committed, but the self-righteousness and lack of guilt Huron felt which damns him. His power and resources now are only increasing, and for the future, perhaps he's ready to achieve his lifelong ambition, the conquest of the Maelstrom Zone. A space marine that was almost bound to fall. I think seeing Huron compared to a lot of other Chaos Lords, you see that even without the power or the influence of Chaos, he was, at heart, really a monster. He's almost a personification of the idea that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Even though he had tried to do his duty in his own way, it led him down a darker and darker path to more cruel and awful tactics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.